Welcome back, welcome back. Better to die than be a coward. That's the motto of the fearless Gurkha soldiers of Nepal, known around the world for their fighting prowess. At the height of their empire, Britain saw the potential of these soldiers, and to this day, the Nepalese Gurkhas have played an important role in the British Army, fighting in wars around the world alongside Britain. But the Gurkhas are in another battle too, this time with the British government, in a quest to settle in the country they have fought for so long. One woman who's been fighting on their behalf very effectively is Joanna Lumley, and her pleas to the British Prime Minister were at first ignored until last week when the Gurkhas won a vote in the UK Parliament. Gordon Brown's response? To call Joanna Lumley in for talks. The story's moving on from new events yesterday, and we've got Joanna with us now to bring us up to speed. Joanna, welcome.
David, thank you so much.
Going back a few years just to start with.
Yes.
The reason really that you first got involved with the Gurkhas was very intensely personal because of your father.
My father was a regular soldier, and he served with the Gurkhas all his life. So he joined up when he was about 19 or 20 when he left Sandhurst. And that's the reason that I was born in India, because my father was serving out there, and then brought up in Hong Kong and Malaysia, which was where the Gurkhas were.
And a Gurkha, Tul Bahadur
Pun, yes. He was in the same section.
Saved your father's life.
He saved the section's life. They were Chindits out in Burma in some of the bloodiest fighting in the last World War. And under unbelievable bombardment, this incredibly brave soldier challenged all kinds of gun emplacements, took them over, wielding his kukri, slew some of the enemy. I mean, he was phenomenally brave. It was carnage all round. And Tul Bahadur Pun and one other were awarded the VC. The other VC was posthumous.
So, in fact, but for that
gallant
Gurkha, we would not have a Joanna Lumley.
David, you put that so nicely.
Now, so you had a background in this.
Yes.
When did you decide to turn it into a campaign that was urgent?
Well, I've been supporting the Gurkhas and the Gurkha Welfare Trust for a very long time, as so many people in this country do, because what's not widely known is that there are 36,000 Gurkha veterans on pensions, of which the government pays for 25,000 of them, and the Gurkha Welfare Trust, out of charity, pays for 10,500. So there is already something not quite right, that we're not even paying our soldiers full pensions, or indeed any pensions at all, and they have to be paid by charity. But about 2 years ago, these cases began to crop up, and it should really be said clearly that this administration, this government, made the enormous step forward of allowing post-1997 Gurkhas the right to settle in this country, to work and to earn money here, retire here if they wish, if they've had 4 years of service. Before 1997, null and void. Only the very special cases would be allowed, and there's only a handful.
Was that because the headquarters changed?
The headquarters had changed. Once Hong Kong went back to China, Hong Kong, which was where the Gurkhas had been based, disappeared. So then the Gurkhas were based from 1997 on in Great Britain. So then they were allowed to stay in this country. But it left this great sheaf of Gurkhas stretching back to about 1970, I would say. Before that, the Gurkhas are now so old and frail and so happy to stay on in Nepal that they won't be applying. So there may be 27 years worth, as it were, of veteran soldiers who have served with extreme loyalty and bravery, who long to come here to work, who would need for their medical conditions, which are things like diabetes or cataracts or high blood pressure, things that can be easily remedied over here, not easily remedied in Nepal. And they want the right to be able to come here. They long to have Britain as a second home. As one Gurkha put it to me last week, Britain is our second home, but always our first love. Now that is quite extraordinary, because it's no use saying these are mercenaries. For some extraordinary separate reason, these men for 200 years, and they're only Nepali soldiers, they're not part of the Commonwealth, it is a completely one-off kind of deal of loyalty, have come to this country, have served, put their hand on the Union flag, and to the Queen vowed to serve our country.
Various figures are wafted about. I think some of your supporters said this could involve 7,000 to 10,000 Gurkhas coming to this country. There are other people who say 36,000.
36,000 is the sum total of retired Gurkhas. The idea that all 36,000 would immediately come over to Britain with their 3 dependents, let's say, all of these people gravely ill and needing National Health Service, all of them, you know, unable to be working and so receive pensions, is absolutely mad.
So this week's been a week of progress. There was the vote, the successful vote last week in the Houses of Parliament. Then you saw Gordon Brown on, and he said in your private session with him that he was going to take this on as a passion of his and come up with new rules and guidelines and so on.
Yes.
Then yesterday you had this confrontation with the immigration minister.
The day after, David, that I'd had this private meeting, which I was so grateful to the Prime Minister for giving me, to discuss how we could make this work. And he'd shown his greatest sympathy for the Gurkhas and said that he wanted to move this forward in the correct manner. The very next day, letters came out from the immigration office,
which were based on the old rules.
Which are based entirely on the old rules, telling people like, for instance, Lance Corporal Gyanendra Rai, who had his back blown open in the Falklands after 13 years of service, because he'd only served 13 years and his back was blown open. He was not allowed to stay in this country, and he wasn't even given a pension. Now, he then, when this was brought up on April the 29th to Mr. Willis, the immigration minister, this case was put before him. Mr. Willis said, no, he absolutely would. He would come under these guidelines. Lo and behold, yesterday a message was sent out to Mr. Rai that his application had been rejected. Then an additional piece on the bottom said, but don't, in effect, I'm paraphrasing, but you don't have to believe this letter because we're going to rewrite the rules and you might be successful in the future. But at the moment, you're not successful. Now, we've just said this is not... Please, this is not the way to do it. Please don't send out these letters if possible. Put a hold on it, say your case will be reviewed at a later date.
So you're nearly there, you think?
We've got private meetings to do. We have got the extraordinary thing is the force of the country. It's like an oven blast behind us. Everywhere we go, everywhere I go in the street, people are winding down windows, shouting from trains, stopping me on the tube, saying, don't let the Gurkhas down, we're all behind you. So we're not going to, and Parliament has spoken, Parliament has shown its will, the people have shown their will, and so we now have the greatest confidence that this Prime Minister and these ministers will do the right thing by the Gurkhas.
Well, and you're an example of that thing, the Kennedy phrase about one man or one woman can make a difference, and you've made the difference here. What about the suggestion in one of the articles, which I think will get a lot of support, which said that you should be the next Prime Minister? What do you think?
Well, apart from going crimson with flattery, the truth is I've had a small glance into Parliament and I know how very, very hard MPs of all parties work all the time. It's an unenviable job, and I think they do, whether they're doing it right or wrong, I think they put in sterling service. So I'm so anxious that we don't betray the politicians by jeering at them. Let's do this properly. Let's give them our support. Let's try to enable them to do the right thing and be behind them and praise them.
Would you like to do more public things, more political things like this, things that you're passionate about, though?
Well, I have always...
Even if you're not going to be Prime Minister yet.
I've always supported causes which are very dear to my heart, and I think that's all you can do. But I would love it if, and I know that there are so many people around the country who feel maybe frustrated. I want to say to them, not only in this country, but all around the world, don't give up. Don't sit back and fold your arms and say, well, what on earth can you do? You can do something. And even if it's a small thing, for whatever your chosen cause is, whether it's recycling or the environment, whether it's human rights or Tibet, or the, you know, animal welfare, whatever it might be, all kinds of things, the local children's charity, all kinds of things. Go and say, what can I do? Because you can make a difference. I think that's what all this last 2 or 3 hot weeks have taught me, is that you can make a difference.
Joanna, thank you very much indeed.
Thank
you have made a difference. You are making a difference. And now we move to Georgia. An alleged military mutiny took place in the former Soviet state this week. It was reported that a rogue tank battalion intended to disrupt the NATO military exercises being held nearby was responsible. Tbilisi has accused Russia of being behind the rebellion, Russians, not Georgians, but Moscow has dismissed these claims as delusional. But within Georgia, members of the opposition are claiming that the coup was actually a ploy by President Saakashvili to draw attention away from popular protests against his rule. So now what's really been going on? And I'm joined now again, delighted to welcome him back, by Donald MacLaren, former UK ambassador to Georgia, to find out what's going on. Welcome back, Donald.
Thank you very much, David.
First of all, Was there a genuine mutiny, do you think?
I believe there was. There's plenty of evidence. It's not being denied by either side. And it seems that there was some sort of rebellion or attempt to get this barracks to get on the move towards Tbilisi.
And was the NATO exercise idea a good one or not? Was it provocative?
The NATO exercise, I believe, had been planned for some time, and normally one wouldn't say that these things should be interrupted, interfered with. Everyone knows about them in advance. In this case, the Russians knew well about it. They'd been informed because they are also, they have a partnership arrangement with NATO. But I think that what NATO might have done to show support for Georgia could have taken place a couple of years earlier. Running exercises now may not actually achieve a great result one way or the other. It's certainly not going to persuade the Russians away from their rhetoric that NATO is just a militaristic organization, and it's not actually going to do much to support Georgia in ways that are particularly meaningful. The area in which NATO could have shown greater support for Georgia was by offering it a membership action plan 2 years ago, long before these present troubles, long before the Russian invasion last summer. And it wouldn't have necessarily guaranteed Georgian membership of NATO, but it would have given a very clear agenda and platform for the Georgian reformist government to go down and to prove its credentials to the West.
So Mr. Saakashvili is a great interview subject. He was with us and wonderfully provocative. That's great as an interview. Perhaps when you're dealing with Russia, it's not quite such a good idea, but how strong is he now? Is he teetering on the brink of being kicked out before the end of his second term or not?
He is in a much more difficult position than he was just a few months ago, certainly compared to August of last year. He is beset with difficulties, some of them not of his own making. But what is interesting is the strength of opposition feeling, not just in criticism of his handling, some would say his launching of the events last August, but their criticism of his handling of his own agenda, his democratic internal reform agenda. There are, of course, calls for Saakashvili to resign precisely because he presided over a failed war or a failed military adventure. But I would say that the broader spread of criticism and popular feeling against the Saakashvili administration is because of what people point to in terms of lack of judicial independence, lack of media freedom, or insufficient.
So do you think he'll survive his full term?
I think it's very hard to see how that can happen if things continue the way they are at the moment. I'm not suggesting that the Russians are just going to suddenly walk in and try to overthrow him. I'm not suggesting that there's going to be a sudden outburst of violence, another tank regiment or infantry battalion or whatever. I think that it's just, there comes a point in everyone's political life where their tenability, their credibility is under such strain, and I think Saakashvili is in that position at the moment. It's very hard to see how he can coast through the next 3 years, 3 to 4 years.
And so what do the Russians want vis-à-vis Georgia? I mean, do they want to take it over, or do they just want to keep it weak and flabby?
I think the Russians have achieved probably more than they ever dreamed of. I wouldn't say that they want to take Georgia over. They'd be very happy with what they've got, and that is in a number of areas. They have prevented Saakashvili from unifying the country, which was his great goal at the beginning, and a very reasonable one. Georgia is a sovereign country, and the Russians had many times acknowledged Georgia's sovereignty and territorial integrity in the United Nations. They've prevented that. They have shown outright support for the separatists. They've now annexed 2 large chunks of Georgia, made it very difficult for any Georgian administration to get back the integrity of the country, and they are thumbing their nose at NATO and the European Union while they are increasing their garrisons in these 2 separatist regions.
Donald, thank you very much for being with us and bringing us right up to speed there.
Thank you very much.
Much appreciated. Cuba's world-famous dancer Carlos Acosta will be with me in just a few moments after the news headlines.